What About Bob is a 1991 film starring Bill Murray as the title character. This film's representation of OCD has been analyzed a lot. Sort of. From what I have seen, at least here on YouTube, the film What About Bob has been analyzed by a lot of psychiatric professionals. I would like to provide another angle, a review from a fellow person with OCD. Because of that, some of my observations might be better fitted to something else, but I'm not a mental health professional. Now, I'm going to be upfront about the fact that I am not the world's biggest Bill Murray fan. He's not the worst actor I've seen, but I'm also not going to drop everything and view all of his filmography like I might with some other actors. Given that his style of comedy is quite prevalent in this film, it might color my views just a bit. But we aren't here for my views on Bill Murray. We're here for the portrayal of mental health. Although I don't believe it is said within the film in so many words, I believe that Bob has OCD, among some other disorders, which we'll get into later. The basic plot of this film is that Bob is seeking treatment for his serious OCD. His new self-centered psychiatrist goes on vacation after Bob's introductory session, leaving Bob alone to deal with his serious OCD. Since Bob also has attachment issues, Bob ends up tracking down his new psychiatrist, Dr. Marvin, at a vacation home. Much to the psychiatrist's frustration, he ends up bonding with Dr. Marvin's family, driving Dr. Marvin to enact serious measures in order to put a stop to it. The film starts off basically immediately with what I'm going to call a manifestation or self-reassurance compulsion. Bob repeats the phrase, "I feel good, I feel great, I feel wonderful," multiple times, even before getting out of bed, and he does this at various times throughout the film when anxious. Another example of this can be seen when Bob walks down the street to his first appointment with Dr. Marvin. I have seen this previously being called an attempt at cognitive therapy. However, because of his response to it, I wonder if it could have morphed into a compulsion. Maybe I'm incorrect on this, but that's my theory, of course. Throughout the film, one of the largest obsessive themes that can be seen with Bob is the reassurance. He seeks reassurance throughout the film from his new psychiatrist, Dr. Leo Marvin, going so far as to trick people into giving the doctor's address while Dr. Marvin is on vacation and has already repeatedly enforced this boundary with Bob. Bob still goes out of his way to seek reassurance from Dr. Marvin specifically that the doctor can help Bob's mental health. Bob admits basically straight away at that first appointment with Dr. Marvin that he knows that he has problems, providing a long list of symptoms. However, I could potentially see this as manifestation of anxiety and OCD. He presents what I like to call what-if thoughts or scenarios, continuing through trains of thought and compulsions, such as faking a heart attack to prove that he doesn't have it. To this effect, a puke bag is repeatedly used throughout the show, reaches into it before putting it away, saying it is a false alarm. I can't help but wonder if that is also this kind of faking it so I don't have it, or if it really is potentially needing to throw up from nervousness. Now, throughout all of this, Dr. Marvin seems to be paying the bare minimum attention to his patient. He appears very disinterested and detached. That being said, the doctor does provide a concise, blunt summary of his diagnosis for Bob.
So, what you're saying is that even though you are an almost paralyzed, multiphobic personality and is in a constant state of panic, your wife did not leave you, you left her because she liked Neil Diamond.
He also diagnoses Bob with
Introductory interview. Multiphobic personality, characterized by acute separation anxiety and extreme need for family connections.
Beyond that, however, it doesn't seem that he is doing much to help Bob in the introductory session. It seems almost like he's just kicking Bob out rather than sufficiently ending the session, giving Bob a copy of his own book, Baby Steps, which is basically another take on desensitization, or I guess like a progressive form of exposure response prevention. at least from what we see in the film. Now, in a change from his previous vocal repetition of "I feel good, I feel great, I feel wonderful," his new repetitive phrase is "baby steps," followed by Bob vocalizing his goal.
Baby steps down the aisle. Baby step down the aisle. Baby step down the aisle. Baby step. Then sit in the seat.
While I feel this baby steps method of ERP can help overall, I could argue that I have done something similar, just not under the same title. I worry about the fact that when confronted with Bob's progress with the baby steps program, as it's called, Dr. Marvin says that
The book is not really meant to work that quickly. It only worked that quickly with Boob. Bob.
You can call me Boo.
I don't want to call you Boob.
Even if you do it as an accident, it's okay.
No, I really don't want to call him Boob. The book isn't, meant to work that quickly.
along with the vocal repetitions, Bob also has a fear of germs and crowds that is present throughout the beginning of the movie. He is seen working himself up with those vocal repetitions, trying to go on an elevator, but ultimately going up multiple flights of stairs. Bob is seen pacing as he tries to get on the bus, ultimately only being able to do so because it is the last bus to his destination, and the bus is about to leave. He is also seen using a tissue for the door and for a handshake with Dr. Marvin upon first meeting him. Later in the show, while trying to trick the phone operator into giving him Dr. Marvin's address, he holds a payphone with a tissue, and after getting the phone back from the random woman pretending to be Dr. Marvin's sister for Bob, Bob sprays the phone earpiece and speaker with some kind of cleanser before putting it up to his ear to speak with Dr. Marvin.
It's not you, it's me.
When getting on the bus to go to Dr. Marvin's vacation spot, he hesitates to get on the bus, and then finally, when he gets on and sits down, he asks a fellow passenger to punch him in the face and knock him out for the duration of the bus trip. It gets to a point where Bob gets off the bus passengers cheer before the bus leaves. Again, mental health in a comedy film, everyone. It is very clear throughout the film that Bob has issues with attachment and abandonment. Honestly, I believe I have given a few examples previously, but I think I have some other ones upcoming. To the audience, it seems that since Bob left his wife, the only semblance of a support system that he has is his fish, Gil. Bob takes Gil with him when visiting the vacation spot of Dr. Marvin, putting Gil in a jar that dangles from a cord around Bob's neck, sort of like a necklace. Bob asks that Gil be transferred to another enclosure as he has been trapped in the jar for hours, and then he continues to carry Gil over to Dr. Marvin's throughout the film. When later threatened to be killed by Dr. Marvin, Bob's main worry is what will happen to his fish. So, other than his fish, Bob's only attachment seems to be to Dr. Marvin. It is clear how unhealthy of a dynamic this is throughout the film as Bob continually pushes past Dr. Marvin's boundaries. First in calling the doctor, bypassing all attempts at speaking with Dr. Marvin's fill-in, who is taking his calls, then in attempting to find the doctor's vacation address, and going so far as to have someone fake being the doctor's sister, and then for Bob to fake his own suicide and pretend to be a detective investigating his own death. Then, once retrieving the address through these means, the last means that is, Bob arrives at the vacation spot. Immediately after arriving, he calls out for Dr. Marvin, and upon Dr. Marvin attempting to re-establish boundaries around not seeing anybody on vacation, Bob insists that,
Come on, I've come so far. I'm baby stepping. I'm doing the work. I'm baby stepping. I'm not a slacker.
Listen to me.
Check it out. Look at I'm in really bad shape. Come on, please,
Bob,
please.
Bob.
Give me. I need.
Bob.
Give me,
Okay,
please.
all right.
and insisting upon seeing Dr. Marvin immediately. Dr. Marvin gives in and agrees to give Bob a call at the cafe if Bob immediately purchases a ticket back home to New York. Bob agrees to this and proceeds to agitate customers in the cafe by refusing to let anybody use the phone. This is in fear of missing his call with Dr. Marvin, despite there being ample time for other calls to take place before his appointment. Then, through a conversation with the cafe owners, Bob ends up further treading over Dr. Marvin's boundaries and finding the doctor's house, and bonding with the doctor's family, including staying at the doctor's house during a storm and beyond. When Dr. Marvin initially takes him aside to tell him how inappropriate it is that Bob is here, then during the conversation with Bob, Dr. Marvin reassures Bob that he doesn't get upset, which is worrying. I feel like everyone should admit that they have feelings, including Sykes. It's understandable for him to say that he isn't upset, but for Dr. Marvin to say that he does not get upset is, I feel, a gross exaggeration, especially considering what happens further into the movie. And again, I know, comedic effect, but still. Letting oneself feel emotions, even if it has to wait until outside a session, is a good thing. It is natural. I'm overthinking this, and I know that, but I feel like this should be a little bit more clear, especially how he says it, because he's especially proud of this fact, it seems. Overall, it's just strange comedy movie kind of stuff, you know? Now, despite trampling over boundaries regarding the Doctor's personal space and time, Bob does try to respect boundaries set around Bob calling him Dr. Marvin in his house. Unlike in his office, in which Bob is allowed to call Dr. Marvin by his first name, Leo. Bob tries his best to correct himself when getting this wrong, and is persistent in trying not to mess up on this name change, which I feel like everybody could just embrace when it comes to misgendering people in general, or dead naming them. Can we please just do this naturally in everyday life? That is the way to do it. Bob has something amazingly right, even in 1991. Now, I feel that even though this is only about halfway through the film, the rest of the film is quite a bit more focused on Dr. Leo Marvin, rather than being focused on Bob. It's more the effects of Bob being around Dr. Marvin and the Doctor's family. Dr. Marvin gets more and more frustrated and more desperate to get Bob to leave the vacation spot, eventually trying to institutionalize Bob, and when that doesn't work, he ends up suffering from an extensive sort of mental break, which culminates in Dr. Leo Marvin trying to kill Bob with explosives. This basically ends up in Dr. Marvin being in a mental health facility himself, in an almost catatonic, nonverbal state, after having what I'm going to call a mental health crisis. Other words were used like a manic episode, but I'm honestly not sure what to make of this because of the lead-up of circumstances within the film. At the very end of the film, Bob considers himself cured by his near-death experience with Dr. Marvin. He escaped being killed, insisting that his almost murder was just another therapy by Dr. Marvin to help Bob get over his fears. Bob even writes a book about this, called Death Therapy, which supposedly ended up being a bestseller, according to the movie. Now, after the film began to get more and more focused on Dr. Marvin, I found myself losing interest. I kept going as it got more and more outlandish, and I got more and more frustrated. I understand that this film was meant to be a comedy, as I have said multiple times throughout this film. However, I find that my distaste for Bill Murray made this practically written for him role, and the effects of that character on the entirety of the film pretty brain-numbingly frustrating to watch. I kept watching only out of a sense of obligation, and because I felt, or I hoped, that it would get more focused again on the character of Bob, and that the film would stop its game of one-upping how outrageous the situation could get between Bob and Dr. Marvin. It didn't. I know that I skimmed over a lot of the latter half of the film, but I feel that I did touch on the important parts like Bob's closeness with the Doctor's family, Bob's attempted institutionalization, followed by the attempted murder, and then Dr. Marvin's own institutionalization. I touched on those purely to go and be like, hi, yes, I did watch more than half the movie. I have seen more than clips, I swear. Overall, what did I think? Barring the frustration I felt with Bill Murray's character of Bob, along with my growing frustration with the outrageous situations that Richard Dreyfuss's character of Dr. Marvin got into, I thought that the first half of the story was an interesting sort of trying to be lighthearted in an early 90s comedy way attempt at looking at OCD-esque behaviors along with abandonment issues. Would I recommend this film? Oh no. Nope, no way, not a chance. Do I regret watching it? Sorta. Honestly, if you're a fan of Bill Murray and his comedy, you might be more interested in this film than I was, and a bit more receptive to it. I think that there are definitely other better resources for exploring the issues touched upon in this film, so maybe go search out some of those. I'll see what I can list down in the description below for some other resources and maybe some other movies that I feel touch upon OCD better. If you have any other subjects about mental health or LGBTQIA+ topics that you'd like to see covered, please let me know down in the comment section below. As always, my resources are listed in the description. Thanks for watching the OCDNB. Stay safe out there.